main idea was that we are interested in how different types of kids are responding to the different interventions that we've been developing over these past multiple decades of intervention research. So I had worked with kids with autism, and I had noticed that obviously there's a lot of differences amongst this population. And so I was interested in seeing whether we could characterize these kids in terms of their multiple types of characteristics, and then B, whether these children's characteristics would tell us anything about what they could learn from these different intervention approaches. Currently, it is a one-size-fits-all approach where in an intervention trial or out in the community, you will compare an intervention to a control group, which is not the intervention or wait list, or in the community, if you're seeking services, you will get the intervention that that company provides. So it's the same approach for all kids who enter into that intervention, whether it is an intervention trial or in the community. And so I had seen working in the community that not everyone learned the same from these approaches, and I was interested to see whether we could look at the child's characteristics themselves in order to tell us more about what intervention would be best for who. So we had two primary objectives. First was to look at the many skills that children bring to the table, their strengths across different domains, including how they think and how they use language, and then look at whether we can combine these skills into individual child profiles. And then the second objective was to tie these profiles to how the children improved in one of two intervention approaches. So we're comparing interventions across these different profiles that we created based on a large combination of child characteristics. This research was specifically focused on kids who didn't use too many words to talk, so on average around 5. And so I combined information from two different research trials to get a large sample of minimally verbal children, which is children who don't use as many verbal words to communicate their thoughts. And so the first method we did was a latent profile analysis, which is just looking at a bunch of different types of measures of who these children are. And it includes autism symptoms, but also how many words they're using to communicate and how they're receiving information receptively, and their nonverbal cognition. So we created these groups based on a variety of a child's characteristics. And then from there, we looked at, again, combining intervention trials within these groups. How do they improve either in a more traditional ABA type approach called DTT, or in a more natural approach to delivering intervention for communication, which is called Jasper in this case. And then so from there, we were able to look at improvements in the two intervention groups in each of those child sort of characteristic categories. Those who had a combination of less language that they used and global delays actually benefited more from the more structured traditional approach. So they gained more language, they used it more frequently overall, and then that was more with that structured approach, that DTT in this case, or discrete trial training. Those who they were not frequent communicators, but they used more words than the other group. They had some more words, but they also had stronger cognitive skills. They gained more language overall with the more natural approach, or Jasper. So we are seeing that these varied child traits or skills are impacting how they're learning from a particular approach, at least in this minimally verbal sample. It helps inform not just that interventions are helpful, but maybe we can make better decisions about which interventions are working for who. And so it's kind of a step towards personalizing interventions for autism. This is something we've been able to start to do in fields like medicine, but in autism, we're still at this one size fits all approach. And we're seeing that that approach is leading to very mixed results, where some people are making gains and some people maybe making less gains. And so the hope is that with a more personalized approach that can maximize the learning for every single child, because we're trying to see which approaches or which methods will be most useful for their learning based on those personal characteristics. So next, there's a couple hopes. This work was really focused on spoken language as an outcome. So I'm also interested in looking at other types of outcomes like play or cognition. And then also these children are learning and changing over time. So these categories were developed when they entered these studies. So they were around 3 to 8. And maybe their characteristics are changing over time. So that means we need to change course over time. So that would be another interesting direction to keep looking at in terms of not only matching the treatment to a child's needs, but changing our plans as children continue to grow and develop as well.